I'm Sam Waters. I am from a group called SURJ, Showing Up for Racial Justice. We are a predominantly white group who follows the lead of people of color-led organizations and are accountable to those organizations. One of our main focuses is educating other white people specifically about racism. So we do lots of workshops, we participate in actions, we do things like this. So that's who I am. I think we need to put the projector on. 25,000 people are in county jails right now in New York State. 2/3 of those people are legally innocent. That means they have not had a trial, and we have the idea of presumed innocent. So we have people sitting in jails who have not been convicted of anything, but are there potentially for years because primarily they can't afford bail.
On any given day, across all of New York State, there are 25,000 people caged like animals. And 67% of those folks are legally innocent.
When you have a man that goes to prison, it's not just that person that goes to prison, it's the entire family.
When my son was incarcerated on Rikers Island, he was tortured, abused, and punished before even he was found guilty. We believe that the solutions need to be driven by the folks who are most harmed and impacted by these awful systems. You need us right at the table.
This is our story. We gotta fight it.
The biggest problem with how bail works in New York State is that most of the folks who are caught up in the criminal justice sector are poor folks who can't afford bail.
I was a 16-year-old incarcerated in Nassau County Jail, and the bail was $4,000. My mother, she couldn't pay the bill off because she's a single parent and she had to take care of the household.
It's like trying to cage a bunch of animals and prosper from them just sitting. Every day is a dollar for New York City or New York State.
People in low-income neighborhoods are being held in jails, unable to prepare a defense for themselves.
My son was there pre-trial for 6 years. I realized then that we do need a speedy trial law.
Speedy trial is supposed to be in the Constitution, but we live in this country where they pushing it, especially in New York State, that they have you sitting for 2.5 years without even seeing your evidence.
New York State's regressive, horrible discovery law has so many implications on folks who are trying to align for themselves a fair shot at innocence and freedom.
My son, during his incarceration, had no access to anything.
District attorneys and the prosecution hold all the cards and hold this information from these defendants, hoping that they will take these plea bargains.
Lack of speedy trial forces people into having to take a plea when, in fact, they may be totally innocent.
People who are presumed innocent, people who are before trial, should not be treated as though they need to be punished.
There are a lot of people that don't get the proper discovery or not given a speedy trial. And they sit there and they literally rot.
He was in limbo for 6 years, and that deteriorated his mind. He was not even a human anymore.
It damages the entire fabric of a human being. The trauma that's caused after that is also monumental in a lot of cases.
Well, the fight shut down the Rikers Island prison complex headed to Gracie Mansion today.
Today, a rally is scheduled to call for Rikers Island Jail to be shut down.
The march was led by the Closed Rikers campaign. They said the facility does not deliver safety or justice.
80% of the folks there on Rikers Island are there pre-trial. if we are talking about folks who are sitting there because they can't afford bail, well, the bail reform from the Free New York campaign could definitely address that.
We want to see the end of cash bail.
Money should not be a leading factor to determine how you fight your case from the inside or the outside.
The other piece of it is discovery overhaul.
New York is like one of the few states that still holds their evidence back. Let me know what the evidence is. Don't just have me locked up for 2.5 years and come to find out there's no evidence.
The other piece of the Free New York campaign is speedy trial.
Speedy cannot be just a vague word. We have to put a date and a deadline to that.
What's powerful about the Free New York campaign is that we're starting a movement of people.
We've been able to get over 100 partner organizations. The jail crisis it's a statewide problem, and so it's gonna take a statewide solution.
These issues, so people are scared to talk about, but with Free New York, you have a voice.
Those are our demands, and we expect for them to be met.
Okay, so that's the basics of the campaign. Here in Monroe County, we're jailing about 1,300 people every day.
Each day?
Every day. About almost 60 of those people are pre-trial. They are legally innocent. They're there primarily because they can't afford bail. Almost half of those people have only been accused of a misdemeanor. These are not necessarily the dangerous, violent people that we hear about. These are people who have committed small crimes, if they've committed them at all. 72% of those who are pre-trial, which means about 45% of the total number of people being jailed, are being held on less than $1,000 bail. So these are not even large bail. On average, they're spending about 30 days in jail. However, these, depending on what happens with their trial, this can be pushed out considerably. It can turn into months. In cases, it's turned into years. And this is not just a human rights issue, this is a financial issue. It costs us, as taxpayers, a considerable amount of money to keep people in jail. It is economically far better to release people of their own recognizance, use pretrial services. The entire point of bail is to ensure that someone returns for their trial date, correct? The most effective way of ensuring someone returns for their trial date is to give them a phone call. Remind them when it's happening. Offer some services like rides and childcare. That's far more effective than bail, which destroys entire lives. This is a case that happened over on Elmwood Avenue here in Brighton. It's a quick aside. You'll notice this is a white man. And why are we talking about a white man at a racial justice workshop? One of the things SURJ does is we try and come from a place of mutual interest. We as white people have a tendency to think about these issues as being other. It happens to those people frequently in the city, frequently people of color. And while yes, those are the predominant people who this happens to, it's not exclusive. This could happen to people who live next door to us. So this is Charles Campbell. In 2016, he was riding his skateboard down Elmwood Avenue, wearing a Guy Fawkes mask. Someone called the police because they thought he looked suspicious. Officers tried to stop him. He stated he was doing nothing wrong. He didn't want to talk to the police, and he did not consent to a search and walked away within his legal rights. Officers chased him down, wrestled him, beat up his head, eventually arrested him. They claimed the company had threatened them with the skateboard and beat one of the officers in the back of the head. None of that appeared in the body cam footage, however. He was charged with resisting arrest. obstructing governmental administration, second-degree assault, and because they found a small penknife on him, having a concealed weapon. Bail was set for $5,000. He couldn't afford this. He spent 2.5 months in jail. When he finally got his trial, the judge ruled that the officer exceeded his authority and had violated company's constitutional rights, and the case was dismissed. However, in that time, he lost his job, he lost his apartment, he lost everything that was in his apartment, including irreplaceable possessions, heirlooms. So he's now suing the town of Brighton, which again affects you as taxpayers as well, because you have to pay for this suit because an officer of the town of Brighton chose to violate his constitutional rights. This is not a unique story. These are the kinds of things that happen all the time. And that's why bail reform particularly is so important. So let's talk about some of the issues. So one of the points is discovery. Right now in New York State, prosecutors can withhold any discovered evidence right until it's time to go to trial. This is one of the most antiquated set of discovery laws in the country. These effectively date back to the colonial period and have never been updated. There are only 4 other states in the country that have not updated their discovery laws. Because people do not see the evidence against them, 97% of these cases end up in a plea deal because people want to get out of jail. They don't know what they're being charged with. They don't know if they can fight it. So they finally just take a deal. But what we can do about it. Right now, there are 2 bills. There's an assembly bill, there's a Senate bill. Right now, they're still in committee. We are currently coordinating with people in those districts to work on their committee members to try and get this out of committee. As soon as it does get out of committee, we are hoping to get a full vote, and we will be coordinating people to push on their representatives to vote for this, to sign on to them. What is great about these bills, and these are coordinated bills, defense will gain access to all the unprivileged information that's discovered as soon as it becomes known, and the disclosure is required to be immediate and mandatory. So the defense attorneys will gain access to everything that has been found related to the alleged crime, and the prosecutors and police are required to turn it over as soon as they find it. Bail reform. So, as we talked about, just being detained and not being able to pay your bail just creates this horrible downward spiral. You lose your job, you lose your house, you frequently lose custody of your kids, you lose access to medical treatment, it rips apart your entire life, and frequently the lives of your family and your community. Again, this pushes people to plea because they can get out of jail. They can get on with their lives. However, if you plea, that means you're considered accused. You're convicted. You have a criminal record now. And that's going to affect your future prospects. What kind of jobs you can get, what kind of housing you can get. Again, your ability to regain custody of your kids, access to your medical treatment. And we've got 2 bills related to bail reform. These are also interrelated bills. I'm not going to read out the numbers. They're also in committee. They're going to eliminate money bail. You're not going to be required to pay out in cash or to put up a bond for the majority of crimes. If the prosecutor does move for bail, they have to prove that they think you are a high flight risk. And the other thing this will do, and this will help not just the people who are accused, but also the rest of us to try and figure out what's going on. It's going to require that pretrial data be collected so that we can get this data and not have to dig it up all the time. Finally, there's speedy trial. There are legal limits to how long it can be between when you are arraigned and when your trial happens. And they sound really reasonable. However, what can happen is that prosecutors have a lot of leeway in pushing back cases. They can say witnesses aren't available, prosecutors aren't available, prosecutors are on vacation. Very convenient, and this is what ends up happening that pushes these trials out so far and just leaves people sitting in jail rotting, waiting. We also have the underlying issue. Courts are under-resourced, they're congested. That makes it even harder to get a date, to get in there, to even try. So again, we have people pleading, becoming felons, becoming people who are unable to continue with their lives in the same way. And unfortunately right now, there's no pending legislation on this. So what we're doing, this is, as I mentioned, this is Just Leadership. They have a history of working in this area. They had the successful Close Rikers campaign that they talked about in the video. Fairly quickly, they convinced the mayor of New York City and Governor Cuomo to commit to closing Rikers. They've got a 10-year plan in place, and they're continuing to monitor and push to make sure this actually happens. Now they figure the next step is for New York campaign. It's work on discovery, speedy trial, and bail reform, and it's already having effect. In just a few months, we saw Governor Cuomo introduce bail reform, speedy trial, and discovery into his budget. These didn't pass, but the fact that he's even willing to talk about it is a victory. We're kind of glad, though, that Governor Cuomo's plan didn't pass, because there are problems. It was a lot of lip service, it was not a lot of real reform. And bad reform is frequently worse than doing nothing. So why not? Judges would have no leeway if a prosecutor asked for detention. If a prosecutor requested that bail be set, the judge didn't have any way to overrule. The prosecutor said they needed to be held on bail, that would happen. Once preventative detention is allowed, prosecutors can keep a person in detention indefinitely. Again, because there was not enough done to force the speedy trial issue, they can continue to delay about as long as they want. It opens up the privatization of pretrial supervision. This can become corporatized and creates a profit point for things like GPS tracking, ankle bracelets, things like that. Effectively creates a situation where you're going to have mass surveillance on entire communities, because you're going to be able to easily see the people the accused are interacted with, as well as the people themselves. In Governor Cuomo's plan, prosecutors would have broad and unreviewable ability to redact anything in their discovery. So any information they did not want the defense to have, they could just redact, and there's no way to appeal that. Of course, the reform does nothing to address the underlying issues of the overloaded courts and the overloaded public defenders. The plight of public defenders is terrible. There are not nearly enough of them. They do not have nearly enough time for the people that they are trying to represent. They frequently don't even get to meet with their clients before they go to trial. They have a few minutes to review a file, and then they're in court. It's terrible. And finally, it would still allow prosecutors to declare themselves ready for trial at any point without the full discovery release, which again, how can someone defend themselves if they don't have all the information? And we've got our legislative timeline. As you can see, we're fairly far into this already. The budget's already passed. We're now towards the end of the legislative session. That means we don't have a very big window right now for the bills we currently have. So if we can get them out of committee, it's going to be a quick, hard push to get to our representatives and convince them to vote. So what we need to be thinking about is how are we going to be ready? This is our timeline for the strategy. What we're working on right now is trying to get the word out to everybody, pushing bills in the Assembly and the Senate. We're going to start doing some actions. There's going to be things like coordinated protests outside the courts, coordinated same-day meetings with legislators in district. There's going to be a lobby day shortly. I don't know the date yet. In May, later in May, in Albany. So again, this is let's get ready, get people educated about this so they know that this is even is an issue. And what can you do? Big thing right now, sign up. I'm gonna put a sign up list on the back, on the table. Get on the mailing list, get ready. Talk to your friends about this. Make sure they know about it. Talk to your organizations. We've got a list of member organizations in the back. If there's an organization you're part of that thinks this is in their wheelhouse, talk to them about it. Get them to sign on. I don't believe this church has signed on. The more people, more organizations we have signed on, the easier it's going to be to apply pressure in the future to legislators. That's it. Get ready. Be ready to go. That's about all I have. People have any questions?
This may be a very ignorant question, but have there been any prosecutors helping with this, even behind the scenes?
Not that I am aware of. They tend to be against these types of
But
movements.
I'm just hoping there might be like somebody working in the back room.
I would not be surprised if there was a former prosecutor in the back room, but I'm not aware of anybody.
Okay, so, ordering excessive bail or fines is unconstitutional at a federal level.
Mhm.
Number one, is that enforced? And number two, has it been applied to the states?
I don't believe in either case. I don't think it is heavily enforced. It's kind of subjective. There's nothing at the state level about excessive bail. So it really is at the judge's discretion.